Good afternoon, members of the media, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to this week's post-cabinet media conference. As you can see, I have with me my colleague, Minister of Health, Minister Deyalsingh. We have come here today to address a few issues coming out of cabinet, and I'm sure that you all have a host of questions, because I recognize some of the faces that have been sending a host of questions to me this week. I'd like to ask, first of all, let me start by saying today at Cabinet a decision was taken with respect to the 14 municipal corporations. The Ministry of Finance was instructed to send in their Central Audit Committee into all of the various municipal corporations and to do special audits, and then if necessary we will follow that up with forensic audits. So today Cabinet has taken a decision to ask the Central Audit Committee out of the Ministry of Finance to go into the 14 municipal corporations and to audit what has been going on at those corporations. As you all are aware, there have been charges laid against officers in at least one of these corporations this week. The police service, through the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, has also indicated to us, the population, that they are investigating some of the other corporations. So Cabinet today has decided that the Ministry of Finance should send in the Central Audit Committee to do the necessary with respect to all 14 of these municipal corporations. Putting on then another decision that was taken today is, you all would have heard, and we are aware that we've had concerns with how porous our borders are. And two of the ways to shore up your border and to prevent illegal trafficking of not only narcotics, arms and ammunition, now unfortunately human elements as well, into Trinidad and Tobago, two of the ways to deal with it are to have patrol vessels out on the waters doing what they have to do, including interceptors, etc. As you are aware, the Honourable Prime Minister paid a visit to the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard just 2 weeks ago, and we made some announcements. The Honourable Prime Minister made some announcements as to what we're doing in working with the Coast Guard and bolstering their capabilities in terms of the type of vessels that they will have available to them to patrol our borders and help in making the borders less porous. As you are aware, there is also quite a sophisticated radar system that also goes up the islands, I think as far as Grenada and even maybe a little north of Grenada. These radar systems are operational. There have been some difficulties with it. Cabinet has taken a decision to upgrade the radar system to make sure it is operating with the best technology, and to re-engage with the provider, an Israeli firm, to ensure that all of our radar systems are properly operational and working properly. We've also taken a decision, because the warranty on these radars has run out, so now it's engaging in a service contract. We have also taken a decision to provide and be responsible for the broadband, the connectivity with the radar systems we have up the islands. Trinidad and Tobago will now be paying for those systems to ensure that we have the widest possible radar coverage with the best possible technology. So that decision was taken today, and we'll be moving immediately to have that implemented to ensure that our radar system is also up to full capability and utilizing the best technology on those radar systems. I'll now ask Minister Deyalsingh to deal with another one of our decisions taken today with respect to the Couva Hospital.
Thank you, Minister Young. So Cabinet today took two decisions and gave me one directive. So let's start off. The trip to Cuba to recruit healthcare workers will take place from the August 26th to September the 1st. I want to remind the public, it was the UNC government in October 2010 that initially cancelled the recruitment of Cuban professionals to this country. And when the healthcare system started to collapse under them in October 2010, they themselves had to go back to Cuba in March of 2011. I want to put that on the public record, that the UNC, in their shortage of wisdom, took the decision in October 2010 not to recruit Cuban nationals and had to rescind that decision to their embarrassment in March 2011. We are going back to recruit foreign Cuban workers, healthcare workers, where those skills do not reside in Trinidad and Tobago, or where they reside, those professionals do not take up employment in the public sector. I want to make that perfectly clear. The directive that I was then given by Cabinet, this whole issue of house officers not being able to find employment or refusing employment, I was directed by the Cabinet today that house officers will now be offered employment in the public health system, and where they choose not to take up those offers, we will call in their gate loans, and they will be asked to pay back the taxpayer all the monies that the taxpayer paid for them to study medicine. So all house officers from now who refuse the opportunity to work, to pay back that to the taxpayer by working, they will now be called upon. We will now call in those loans. That is a directive that I have been given, which I will faithfully implement. So I have dealt with the Cuba issue. I have dealt with the house officers issue. The next major decision that Cabinet took today has to deal with the operationalization of the Couva Hospital. First of all, let me say it is not a children's hospital. That was a name given by the UNC to pull on the heartstrings of Trinidad and Tobago. The majority of beds there are adult beds. There are 80 children's beds and over 140 adult beds. So it is not a children's hospital, it is a hospital. We have stated publicly that we are going to engage the University of the West Indies in this venture. The decisions taken today are: 1, we will set up a special purpose company done by the Ministry of Finance. Government will own 51%, UE will own 49%. What was it? Sorry, I apologize. Government will be the minority shareholder and you will be the majority shareholder. I apologize for that. The second decision is that a board of directors of the special purpose company is to be set up, a 7-member board. There will be a nominee from UWI St. Augustine. Professor Terrence from UWI will be the second person on the board. Professor Brian Copeland of UWI will be the 3rd member of the board. Ms. Andrea Taylor Hanna, also of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, will be on the board. The Chief Medical Officer of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Roshan Parasram, will be a nominee from the Ministry of Health. Mr. Stuart Smith, Senior Health Systems Advisor at the Ministry of Health, will be the 6th member of the board. And the 7th member of the board will be from the public, nominated by the Ministry of Finance. So it will be a 7-member board to oversee how we engage and how we operationalize the Couva medical facility. We will also be taking steps to engage with the Minister of National Security to ensure that foreign medical students will get the necessary seamless student visas, because this now will be education, tourism coming into Trinidad and Tobago. Foreigners paying, hopefully in US dollars, will now come to Trinidad to be a part of this training facility. Once the special purpose company is established, in consultation with the Ministry of Health, we will explore the feasibility, which should be relatively easy, of teaching in all our major hospitals throughout Trinidad and in Tobago for clinical rotations for both local and foreign medical students. including, as I said, the Scarborough General Hospital. And the Scarborough General Hospital is to be declared a teaching hospital for this purpose. Other decisions taken for this facility is that the special purpose company to be mandated to pursue the operationalization of the Couva facility as a paying hospital open to the public. And the Ministry of Health will purchase goods and services as we currently do with other private sector providers. We will purchase if a patient needs to go there, if for some reason they cannot be accommodated in the public sector, if they have to go there, we will pay for them. I must put this in the context of what is happening with other infrastructural projects. Currently in Trinidad and Tobago, our public bed stock is 2,998. That's the total number of beds throughout our public healthcare system, which are all free. Coming on stream very soon will be an additional 61 beds at Point Fortin. That Point Fortin Hospital is due to be opened by the second quarter of 2019. So that's a 61 additional free beds. The Arima Hospital, with an additional 150 free beds, will also come on stream by the second quarter of 2019. And when the new central block is built, that will give you an additional 140 free beds. So the only part of this, which will be a fee-paying basis, is going to be Couva. But if a patient in the public sector needs to access care there, we will pay for it. Ladies and gentlemen, what this arrangement will do with UWI is mirrored on the Jamaica situation, where Mona Jamaica has a fee-paying hospital attached to it. But it's not about the fee-paying. It's about what this does to the training of all healthcare professionals and raising the standard of healthcare in both the public sector and also the private sector. This arrangement has the potential to dramatically change the landscape of the provision of medical services to the taxpayer in both the public and private sector. It also has the capacity and the capability of bringing research into Trinidad and Tobago, which will redound to the benefit of all of us. It has the capacity to change practices and behaviors in the provision of medical services which do not currently redound to the benefit of the taxpayer. This vision, which we have to credit the Prime Minister for, it was the Prime Minister's vision that UWI be included in this arrangement, as I said, has the potential to radically change for the better the provision of medical services to the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the two cabinet decisions. One, to go to Cuba to recruit foreigners, bearing in mind it was the UNC in 2010 that took a decision not to hire Cubans, but had to rescind that decision when the folly of that decision was made. Two, as far as our young doctors are concerned, if you decline the offer to work in our public health facilities, your gate loans are going to be called because you signed that document. When you access gate, when you access taxpayers' money to study free of charge, part of that was to serve the government of Trinidad and Tobago. We are going to be enforcing that now. And I have given you the details on the Couva facility.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, Minister Deyalsingh. Just to give you all a little by way of background, the genesis of the idea of this government for the Couva Hospital. Dr. Rowley had attended the heads of government CARICOM meeting in Haiti earlier this year, if my memory serves me correctly. I think it was in March of this year. And at that meeting of CARICOM heads, UWI, the management of UWI, led by the Chancellor of UWI, came to the heads of CARICOM to talk about the indebtedness of the various CARICOM nations to UWI and in particular the effect that was about to have on their accounts and the potential for their accounts to be, for the auditors of those accounts to basically indicate, I'm trying to remember the accounting term now that they use, but to basically indicate that they had difficulties on their books because the indebtedness was rising too much to qualify their accounts. And what came out of that meeting and that discussion, the amount and the figure that they suggested at the time that Trinidad and Tobago is indebted to UE4 was somewhere between the sum of $230 to $300 million. The Prime Minister then saw an opportunity to operationalize the Couva Hospital facility, which was built with a teaching facility, and eradicate UWI's debt on its books by finding a way to transfer this asset to the University of the West Indies. So whilst we had hoped to have made an announcement earlier in the year to the public of Trinidad and Tobago, it's taken a bit longer because, as Minister Deyalsingh has just pointed out, we've come up with quite an innovative way by putting the asset into a special purpose vehicle, then shifting the arrangement where the taxpayers continue to own 49% of the asset, UWI will own 51%, and we now put UWI to work with an operator, and UWI will be in charge of operationalizing the teaching facility, but also working with the operator for the provision of the health facilities that you've just heard Minister Deyalsingh say. The teaching facility is going to be 75% foreign income derived, 25% local. So immediately it builds up UWI's capacity as well to deal with the scholarship winners on an annual basis, and as well as local fee-paying students who have the ability to pay fees and also the grades to get into the University of West Indies. But now, because they only take on 250 students a year, we've increased that capacity. And Trinidad and Tobago is now going to enter the foreign student market out there, 75% of this facility. So these are some of the things that are very innovative with respect to the Couva facility. This is hoping to be operationalized as soon as possible. The SPV has been incorporated. We're now going to populate it. We're going to let, as you've heard, 4 members of the board be nominated by UWI, 3 by government, 2 from the Ministry of Health, 1 member of the public through the Ministry of Finance, to get this facility operationalized to provide fee-paying patients with state-of-the-art facilities, but also increase our capacity for teaching facilities of medical students at UWI through the Couva Hospital. At this stage, I'll open the floor to take some questions. Jewel.
Yes, so Jewel, on TV6 News. I do want to follow up on the issue of the medical announcements that were made.
Sorry, yeah, go on. There's one other thing I have to announce.
But I want to get some clarification from your minister. We saw a situation where the new police commissioner received his letter of appointment, and then there's a negotiation for his terms and conditions, while Mr. Stephen Williams is still the acting commissioner. One opposition MP has questioned whether the situation now operating in secret. We have 2 police commissioners. Should it have been that the negotiations and terms should have been completed and then Mr. Griffith receive his appointment?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to clarify that, because I mean, once again, it gives me an opportunity to have a conversation with the media to say we must be very careful as to the sources of information, and in particular those who engage in mischief out there, and in particular that opposition MP. Just before I do that, however, the last announcement I had to make is that the Attorney General has gone out of the jurisdiction this morning until the 21st of this month, and Minister Hines is acting Attorney General in his absence. Thank you. Now, as you are aware, Mr. Stephen Williams has been acting Commissioner of Police for a period of time, almost for a period of 6 years. There have been many instances when Mr. Williams has gone out of the jurisdiction and someone else has acted in his stead. So we're dealing here with acting. As you are aware, Mr. Gary Griffith is currently not in the jurisdiction, is he? So by logic, even if he were already in his substantive post, working as the Commissioner of Police, everything had been settled and you were working, you would need to have an acting commissioner because he's out of the jurisdiction. That's the first point. You haven't seen, the public hasn't seen the letter of appointment from the public, from the Police Service Commission. all right, and what in particular that letter said. And it was really correspondence, because as you know the process, the Parliament dealt with what was sent by the Police Service Commission and a order of merit list. It came through the Parliament took a decision, the majority of parliamentarians elected to support the nomination of Mr. Gary Griffith as the Commissioner of Police. That is then sent back to Her Excellency by the Parliament. Her Excellency then presumably sends that on to the Police Service Commission. The Police Service Commission has, at the end of that mandate and that legal process, to appoint the Commissioner of Police. And what my understanding is that they wrote to Mr. Griffith to tell him he had been successful, and as a result of that, he will be appointed with terms and conditions to be agreed upon, because that's the end of the Police Service Commission's remit in it. So they've told him, you are the Commissioner of Police elect. Basically, you will be the substantive Commissioner of Police with your terms and conditions to be worked out. That is not for the Police Service Commission to do. It then moves to the government. With these types of positions, there's only one prior occasion where we have had persons appointed to the post of Deputy Commissioner of Police and Substantive Commissioner of Police from outside of the police service. Prior to that, persons appointed substantively in the post have risen through the ranks of the police service. So now, and on that occasion, Cabinet approved the terms of and conditions of Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Iwatsky. Cabinet approved it. So that is the precedent set. We are now faced with a Commissioner of Police who, again, did not rise through the ranks. So he is not a police officer who has arisen, gone through the ranks, gone through the law, and now been appointed the Substantive Commissioner of Police. So it falls to the Cabinet to decide the terms and conditions of Mr. Gary Griffith. And I can tell you all that what this Cabinet has done is an offer was made by the Ministry of National Security to Mr. Griffith. That offer was in line with the SRC recommendations, because of course it's a negotiation taking place. He has now counter-offered, and that has been sent to the CPO, because it is the Chief Personnel Officer who really determines the contractual terms and conditions that should or could be offered to contractual positions. So Mr. Gary Griffith, not being a police officer rising through the ranks, what he has been offered is a contract by the Police Service Commission, with the terms and conditions now to be worked out by the government, Ministry of National Security, getting the advice of the CPU, and then the Cabinet will approve these terms and conditions. So the answer is, there is no secrecy, there is full transparency. When you look at it logically speaking, there is absolutely no cause for concern or any alarm. Mr. Griffith returns to the country, I believe, on the 16th of August. Mr. Stephen Williams is going on some vacation from the 17th of August to the 30th of August. We are hoping before then terms and conditions will be worked out. Whenever you have somebody coming into a substantive post, there will then be a handover and a transition period between that person and the person who's been acting. There's nothing unusual with this. This happens in large entities, large enterprises. For example, in the CEO position, you have somebody acting in the CEO position. You then advertise for permanent CEO, and if the person who is going to be awarded the position of CEO is not the person who's acting, they will come in on a substantive date agreed amongst all parties. So the date for Mr. Griffith to assume office as Commissioner of Police will be an agreed date between the parties as to when he will come in. We will work out, I've already spoken to Mr. Williams and to Mr. Griffith, and we will work out a proper transition and a handover process to take place. And by then, Mr. Griffith's terms and conditions would have been settled.
So is it that the government, or have the negotiations between the government and Mr. Griffith been concluded so that it has gone to the CPU?
No, it can't be concluded. What I said happened is a position was put to him, step one. He has counter-proposed, step two. His counter-proposal has now been sent to the Chief Personnel Officer, step three. We are waiting the Chief Personnel Officer's advice, and this is normal with every single government contractual position. We will wait her advice. At that stage, we will consider her advice before putting that proposal then to Mr. Griffith. If he accepts, then the process would have been concluded, and that is how we would go forward.
not being a police officer rising through the ranks, any concern as to how effective he could be if there is any resistance from any members of the police service executive rank and file officers? Because at the end of the day, one of the things that will come out of this is a situation where an officer may say, well, look, I could work as long and hard as I can and then reach a certain level, but I may never become police commissioner because of the system.
Okay, so two questions I understand you to have asked there. The first is we have now seen, and you all know when I've appeared here before, I don't like to speculate. We have now seen, from what I've read in the media, that the First Division officers, and in particular their representative, Mr. Seals, has said they will support Mr. Griffith coming into the role of Commissioner of Police. My interaction with police officers for the past few days this week, they have all unanimously indicated that they're willing to work with the government as well as the incoming Commissioner of Police to fight crime and to make our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago feel safe once again and to take on this scourge of crime. So I am hoping that that is going to be the modus operandi going forward. Part of management of any entity coming in as a new manager of any entity, you may face pockets of resistance, and it's how you deal with those pockets of resistance. At the end of the day, as the Minister of National Security, I would like to call upon all police officers in Trinidad and Tobago to put their best foot forward and to work with the new Commissioner of Police as well as the government as we attempt to take on this scourge of crime and return Trinidad and Tobago to a safe place once again.
Just picking up on where you left off, just to confirm the terms and conditions, well, you did say that his effective date of appointment is yet to be set, and also
you can be appointed into the position. So he has been informed that he will be appointed the Commissioner of Police. It's when you start the job. So I mean, all of you all, when you would have received a letter of offer of employment, and then you work out the date that you're going to start your employment with your employer after you've agreed what your salary is, what your enumeration days of vacation, etc. So there's nothing unusual in this situation. He's been told you have been selected as the Commissioner of Police, your terms and conditions are to be worked out, which is what is going on here. And then the next step is, once we've agreed that, then we will announce the date of him effectively coming into the post.
Just for my clarification, the length of contract, is it 3 years?
All of those things are to be negotiated and worked out. I don't want to say that we've agreed a term and then not others, etc. Let's wait until we've agreed everything.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Young. Shane Scarborough from the news newspaper. First of all, congratulations on your appointment as National Security Minister. Just wanted to know, in that vein, are there any short-term or long-term changes or improvements you have for the ministry as it is right now?
Thanks, Shane. As you all would be aware, and I'm looking around, I'm smiling at the faces I see in front of me, you all have been reaching out to me since the announcement on Monday morning, and you all have been asking for interviews, you've been asking my position, etc. I am being very measured, being very careful, and I am not going to rush off, even at this stage as Minister of National Security, to say these are the plans, this is what's going to be done, etc. The first thing, and which I've been doing for this week, is meeting with all of the various heads, getting a proper understanding of what it is exists. At my meeting with the heads of security, that is the Acting Commissioner of Police, the Acting Deputy Commissioner of Police, Mr. Harold Phillip, Mr. Stephen Williams as the Acting Commissioner of Police, the head of SSA, the head of the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force, Fire Service, and the TTDF this week. I asked them for certain information. I've asked them to deliver that information to me by tomorrow, so I have a proper view of the landscape of both Trinidad and Tobago and what exactly it is we are facing in accordance with their information, in accordance with the intelligence. At that stage, yes, there are certain things we will be discussing as how I would like to give them advice in terms of going forward. It can't continue to be the way it was before. I want to utilize a lot more technology, etc. But at this stage, I think it's premature for me to come out and say, this is what's going to be done, short term, long term, medium term. What I can say is I give my full commitment to any portfolio I have. I'm giving my full commitment, 100%, to national security and to do what I've been asked to do by the Prime Minister, by the Cabinet, and by the people of Trinidad and Tobago, which is to do my best in that portfolio and work with all of the elements in the national security portfolio to deal with what is going on.
Minister of Communication, I must put this to you. Could you tell us why exactly the announcement of the cabinet reshuffle came at 12:24?
You know, again, I smile because one thing you learn, and it's not only to do with communication, is no matter what you do, there's going to be some other spin or some other element on it. At the end of the day, the decision as to who holds what cabinet portfolio lies with one individual. That lies with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister took a decision. The Prime Minister was in Tobago. The Prime Minister would have implemented that decision by signing off on various instruments, etc. And he took a decision to put that out there into the public arena at the hour that it was put out there. I've been fascinated that this has turned itself into a story, because quite frankly, I'm not sure that it really makes a difference as to what hour it was put out there. It was put out there immediately, within minutes of it being there. Members of the media were contacting me. We live in a day and an age of 24/7 information coming and going. So I think the whole timing purpose is not one that is relevant, in my view. There's absolutely nothing sinister about it. And you hit the ground running on Monday morning. Everybody was aware of it by then. Commentators had begun discussing it, etc. As to what is the particular reason it was put out at that hour, I don't have an answer to that, but I certainly don't see an issue with it. If you had waited until, and next thing, other people will say, why did you wait so long, etc. Another comment that I've seen them trying to push, those who are opposed or just want to be relevant, is for the Prime Minister to give reasons. If you all go back into history, you will see that every cabinet reshuffle, as I said, is a decision of the Prime Minister. That's his prerogative. And they don't give reasons. You don't come out and say the reason I've done X and Y with respect to Minister A and B is for the only time I could remember that is under the last administration in February 2015, when we had the display of our Prime Minister firing, or I think she put it, she accepted the resignation of her then Attorney General, who we now know is before the criminal courts on a charge coming out of why he resigned. And quite ironically, at that stage, it was the then Minister of National Security, Mr. Gary Griffith, who we know stood up and refused to tell a lie, and he's now going to be our Commissioner of Police. And that was the announcement. So I think in an instance like that, where, and history has now shown, criminal charges have flown from an incident, then a Prime Minister will come out and say, well, look, this is why I've done what I've done.
When there's no reasoning or no reasons offered, that's when the suspicions come forward, especially given that your appointment was made just days after Gary Griffith also received his instrument of appointment. Why would you change the minister who Mr. Griffith would then have to negotiate with, who he would have to work closely with, you know?
That is a decision, as I say, for the Prime Minister. I have seen the speculation, I've seen the suggestion, and this gives me an opportunity to just correct some, again, of the misinformation, fake news, and really downright lies being proffered by persons who are not even in the know. First of all, there was absolutely no dissension amongst the PNM MPs when we met before Parliament. When the whip was lifted, the Prime Minister did tell us before we went downstairs into the chamber, feel free to vote. Vote how your conscience is, etc., etc. And that is how all of the members, I think it was 19 of us there that day in the chamber, voted. There was not a single voice that was not in favor or in support of from the PNM ranks of Mr. Griffith. But yet still, some members of the media are allowing those on the other side to run with our story. And I'm seeing Dr. Munilal saying that he knows for a fact that completely false, not true. But what is interesting to me is they have had on their side persons come out and tell the media, well, you know, I didn't want to vote that way. I couldn't reach my leader because she was in a football match in Miami at the time. How could your caucus not reach you because you're busy parlancing in Miami watching a football match and you're not giving instructions to your bench? They couldn't even raise the whip for them, right? I'm told what the football match was. So don't focus on the fake news. First point, all 19 PNM MPs were in full support of the decision. If they weren't, they had the opportunity with no threat whatsoever to vote in accordance with their conscience. And the nation saw on live television how the 19 MPs voted. The second position, as I said, is up to the Prime Minister to decide in his wisdom and his experience who he wants to put where and where he wants to move persons, etc. I have actually seen a lot of positive suggestions, including on some of your polls on the television, as to how people think this new arrangement may work going forward. Now, I caution the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, there is no magic wand. There is no magic pill. And not for want of a pun, but there is no magic bullet either to solve crime in any country of the world, including Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, I woke up this morning and I was receiving reports from a citizen in Milan who had gone on vacation with their family, and they're telling me when they came off the train, they were snatched by two people and their hand luggage, etc., gone with their jewelry, and they had to run them down. Every country in the world has issues of crime. Trinidad and Tobago and this government, we're not burying our head in the sand. We know crime is the number one issue. We're going to do everything we can to deal with it. We have the opportunity now in the Prime Minister's wisdom. We have a new Commissioner of Police. He's appointed a new Minister of National Security, namely myself, and I'm going to give my full commitment to that job and portfolio.
Explain to the MPs of the government on that day why he decided to lift the whip.
The Prime Minister, it's not an explanation. He said, look, we're going down in the chamber. We're dealing with this issue. We had promised a Commissioner of Police. He believed that Mr. Griffith would make a good Commissioner of Police. And I mean, in his wisdom, he's been in the Parliament for 25, 30 years. This is one of those instances where it makes sense as a democratic leader, I think, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, to lift the whip and let persons vote how they want. It shows a good style of leadership, that I'm not forcing anyone here to go along with this if you don't want to. And he said that.
Any one thing, excuse me, just want to follow up on something. You said you didn't want to give any specifics about plans and crime fighting and so on and all of that. But you've also been a communications minister, minister in the office of the Prime Minister. I think you've been on the National Security Council.
Yes, so I have been on National Security Council from the start of the administration.
Item or issue that you would like to see addressed as a priority in national security now that you've taken up that portfolio?
I said a short while ago I've asked for very specific information. I'm supposed to get that information tomorrow. I am at this stage considering within the next week to have a specific press conference as the Minister of National Security after I've had more meetings with the heads, etc., looked at the information they've provided. At that stage, I'll be prepared to discuss more. At this stage, I'm not going to even tell you where my areas of focus are. I just think it's too premature.
Minister,
yes,
we woke up this morning, the media fraternity woke up this morning to hear the disturbing and unfortunate news that Kamal Georges was robbed at gunpoint. What are your thoughts on that as new National Security Minister?
Well, I could tell you, I woke up this morning, I think if you speak to Mr. Georges, he will tell you, I think before 6 o'clock this morning, I reached out to him personally. Every citizen, every law-abiding citizen of Trinidad and Tobago who has a frontal, personal confrontation with crime, I feel for them as a human being and as a citizen. It's now my duty to work with the law enforcement officers, to give them the policy, to give them the direction, and to work along with them to try and deal with these issues. I reached out to Kamal and told him how sorry I was in the first instance that he had to fall a victim to crime. Secondly, to find out exactly where it took place. Thirdly, to find out if they had taken his phone as well. And then I immediately instructed the heads of our national security apparatus to do whatever it is they could, using technology and otherwise, to try and bring some detection to the system. Because unfortunately, Kamal's car was taken, etc. I'd asked him if at that stage he recovered it. He had said no. He said he had had a good experience in the St. James police station interacting with the officers. There's nothing pretty about crime. There's nothing good about crime. There is nothing that this government will condone about crime. And it is quite unfortunate whenever someone we know personally is affected by crime, and there are way too many instances of that. Last night, I was getting the reports, and you all would have seen what happened in Aruka Maloney. Unacceptable. Again, this is just as a result of the proliferation of illegal arms and ammunition into Trinidad and Tobago. You would see what the government is doing. We're trying to bolster and close off our border. I've come here, the first announcement I've made today is ensure that our radar systems are working. And it is because no one in Trinidad and Tobago makes guns. In the old days, you used to say a homemade shotgun. You're not seeing that anymore. You're seeing very, very sophisticated firearms. And we're going to do all that we can to try and get this back under control.
Minister, to get those radars up and running again,
They are up and running, huh?
You mentioned a cost. How much
I didn't mention a cost. But I can tell you what the decision is that we've taken this morning. We're going to spend about $7.5 million US. They are up and running. This is now to get them with the best possible technology, ensure that all of these systems are working. We are now responsible, as I said, for the link from up the Eastern Caribbean islands down to Trinidad and Tobago, and just to make sure we're getting the full use of the technology. We're upgrading some of the cameras they use and these types of things.
Was a couple of questions to the health minister, because they've also raised some very important issues. For example, the issue of Cuban doctors or health professionals working in Trinidad and Tobago, is that something that has to be discussed with the medical board of Trinidad and Tobago? And what about the issue of registration to practice in Trinidad and Tobago?
The registration is handled by the medical board, and we have their cooperation.
And so when you go to Cuba, are you dealing directly with the Cuban health ministry or the Cuban government, or how is this going to work?
You deal directly with the Cuban health ministry.
Have you already had conversations with?
Of course. This going back to Cuba is predicated on a agreement that we have signed with Cuba earlier this year. Every 2 to 3 years, these country-to-country agreements come up for renewal. So we would have renewed in April of this year. Cabinet would have approved it by the end of April. I would have gone to Cuba in May of this year and signed it with the current health minister. In that agreement, would have had this proposal to come to Cuba now to recruit.
Do you have a budgetary allocation in terms of?
No, the budget will depend on how many we recruit, right? But there's a line item at the Ministry of Health to pay for this.
Again, Jules, this is not something new. I think I was trying to remember. I didn't have it's since 2005.
This goes back to about 2005, 2004. This is an ongoing process. This is not new, Joel. The UNC is trying to paint this as new. This is an ongoing recruitment with Cuba that is over 10, 15 years old, that the UNC stopped in October 2010.
And restarted in March 2012.
And then when the weight of their folly collapsed on them, they had to run back to Cuba, cap in hand, in March 2011 and reinstate the thing. Because we have a dearth of specialists. What we are recruiting are not GPs, are not house officers, contrary to what Tim Gopi-Singh is saying. And Tim Gopi-Singh's view is divergent from Fuad Khan's view, who was on TV6 last night. Two divergent views coming from the same party, unheard of. This is an ongoing process that we have had with the government of Cuba for almost a decade and a half, because there's a dearth of specialists. And let me reiterate, this is to recruit specialists in certain key areas, and let me give you the specialist areas. 1, cardiology. 2, gastroenterology, hematology, nephrology, internal medicine, orthopedic surgery, pediatric cardiology, which is a big problem here, pediatric cardiology, maxillofacial surgery, people who need oral surgery, people who have gunshot wounds, you need maxillofacial surgeons. There's a shortage of maxillofacial surgeons around the world. Around the world. And we only have 2 in the public sector. And those 2 are from Cuba. We have to get more. I have 1 now in Southwest, and I think 1 in Port of Spain. But we need more. Ophthalmology. and accident and emergency. So these are the 10 major areas to recruit specialist skills which we cannot source locally, or if they are available locally, they are unwilling, for whatever reason, good reasons, not to participate in the public health sector. We as a government have a duty to provide care to people when they come to the public institutions. And this is fulfilling that mandate of caring for our people. Sure.
Is it that there are these specialists in the private health sector in Trinidad and Tobago?
There are some, but even maxillofacial surgeons, you don't have enough maxillofacial surgeons, even in the private sector, far less for the public sector. You don't have enough pediatric cardiologists, even in the private sector. So there are shortages both in the private sector and the public sector.
So are you dealing with this issue in terms of seeking health sector professionals from Cuba, the specialists? What about any plan to help build local capacity in terms of training, getting people registered as specialists?
So that is quite the responsibility to the University of the West Indies. And they recently started, to their credit, a DM program to train specialists. But they are now in the creeping stages. So they have this specialist training program for radiologists, I think obstetrics, anesthetics, but they don't have for all of these things. So there's still going to be a lag. But I have a need now to fill for you, the taxpayer. So Joel, if you present to the A&E, if you present to a hospital and you need oral surgery, am I going to say, well, let's wait for somebody to graduate from UE and come back in 4 years? You will crucify me. So I have to provide these services for the population like yourself now.
Just to disaggregate on that point, another piece of mischief by the opposition. They are trying to tie up, and I'm seeing the narrative being carried, they are trying to tie up the fact that there may be all of these young doctors qualifying and coming out, and they're not filling those positions.
Correct.
As Minister Deyalsingh is saying, those are not the positions that are being filled. As you would be aware, to become a specialist in each of these fields, after you've qualified as a GP, you then have to go off and do specific training and then become qualified, spend a certain amount of time, etc. So the attempt by the opposition to say that these two are interlocking is a complete mistruth.
Joel, let me ask you a question. If you have a child who is in need of pediatric cardiology services, would you be comfortable going to the public health system and having a house officer treat that child?
I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to that. I could imagine parents here.
Urvashi, you need specialists. All this talk about house officers is not valid.
I think that is probably where the government should be offering scholarships in those areas that you probably pointed out. So by the time the contracts for these Cuban doctors, 3 years, 5 years are up, maybe we would have graduates.
And some scholarships are being offered, but the long-term solution is to have UE step up to do the DM programs, and we are working with UE to do that so we can have the training done here.
All right, yes.
I just want to get in some questions. Today is the last day for the IPO, and I haven't got any feedback just yet.
I think, yes, 7 o'clock tonight is the last day, not the IPO, the subscription for the NIF. Again, I don't want to speculate because, as I say, until the end is the end. But I think we're looking at a serious oversubscription. I'll allow myself to say that.
So, Minister, are you going to extend the date now? Saying
No.
that there's that's it.
We've had it open for a month. I almost said a year. We've had it open for a month. It's been a good month. We've put resources behind it, etc. We hope all who are serious and wanted to have participated, and it will be closing off at 7 o'clock tonight. And I think
Bonds were preferred.
actually, I think all categories of the bonds, the 5, the 12, and the 20, are going to end up oversubscribed.
On another issue, the issue of the NLCB, would you be able to tell us who authorized the NLCB to start deducting that 10% from the gamblers?
I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you today is Cabinet took a decision and it will be proclaimed on Monday. The Section 9 of the specific act.
This is a two-part question.
This is a what question?
A two-part question.
Two-part.
On Saturday, an assassination attempt was made against the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. And well, I understand that 6 persons have been arrested so far in Venezuela. I'd just like to know on the part of Trinidad and Tobago's government, is there any sort of concern of growing unease or unrest as it is in Venezuela right now? And the second part of it being, you know...
Let's take it one at a time. All right. The first is, as you say there, what you say it quite conclusively. We've seen allegations of an assassination attempt. We've seen the videos, etc. Obviously, this is something that concerns us. Any attempt on any leader of any country in the world, in particular, Venezuela is our neighbor, as we have said previously, and we continue to maintain good relations with Venezuela. We continue not to interfere in the internal operations of Venezuela, and anything going on internally in Venezuela, we continue to have our concerns, them being so close. We have had, at a certain level, a conversation with them, you know, just to say that we've seen what's going on and we're happy no one was seriously hurt, etc. And they run their country. They will continue to deal with their internal operations.
Those remarks, well, the second part of the question being, those remarks were extended to them. Was it extended directly to the president himself as sort of, I don't know, well wishes in this time of strife?
No.
On the ongoing talks between our government and the government of Venezuela concerning cross-border gas and those arrangements?
No. In fact, the talks with Dragon have gone extremely well, and right now I'm just waiting for the final thumbs up, and then I'll be able to announce to Trinidad and Tobago.
It has been reported that Griffith has a 78-point plan to deal with crime and the fear of crime amongst our citizenry. Just wanted to know, in any of your correspondences with him, you know, have you all discussed this in any kind of link?
Again, that's a question for Mr. Griffith as to how many points he may have on a plan, etc. I have been in correspondence with Mr. Griffith. We've exchanged some level of communication. At the end of the day, he's off on vacation with his family, and I will wait till he comes back. I've told him when he gets back, we will sit down and start going through what needs to be gone through.
Tomorrow's retreat?
It starts very early in the morning. Quarter to 8. No, we're expecting a full day retreat tomorrow. The cabinet will meet in the first instance, and then our members of parliament who are not the elected members of parliament who are not part of the cabinet will join us at 2 o'clock. All right.
You're talking about the porous borders and the update that you're going to do to the
radar system.
I'm sorry. But what about, I think recently I heard a few days ago a young lady was kidnapped. She's suspected to be part of a human trafficking ring or something to that effect. But what about those illegals? There's an estimated 40,000 Venezuelans in TNT. What are we doing about those persons already here? Now, just to point out to you as well, I've noticed that when there's court reporting, we see more people of Venezuelan nationality being hauled before the courts for several offenses. Does this concern you? And I mean, it falls under your mandate as Minister of National Security. How would you be addressing
Okay,
this?
you've raised a number of points here. First of all, and I don't want them intertwined, you started talking about illegal and then you jumped to 40,000. They're not 40,000 illegal immigrants, Venezuelans in Trinidad and Tobago. That 40,000 figure comes from the UN as the estimate of the number of refugees or persons from Venezuela, not refugees, persons from Venezuela who are in Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, the answer is yes. Obviously, is of concern to us, is not only with respect to Venezuela. Any illegal immigrants in Trinidad and Tobago, anyone who participates in illegal activity is of concern. One of the conversations I had at the ministry yesterday, and I asked them to see the policy on, is the migration policy, which directly affects that. There is a human trafficking group, body in the Ministry of National Security that works along with the Attorney General's office. They have been doing some good work. I've also going to be getting reports from them as well. That is something that I am concerned about, because we're seeing more and more instances of it. We're seeing suggestions of it. It is something that we will do all that we can, working with the police and immigration to clamp down on.
Crisis in Venezuela, understood, but how many Venezuelan nationals could we maintain? I'm going in Maxis, I'm going to the market, I'm going to the malls, and we're seeing them shopping, they're going about. Is anyone stopping them and looking for documentation? I'm not saying to send them back, but is there a policy to treat with them? Do we record them at least?
Everybody who comes into Trinidad and Tobago legally is recorded. So first of all, don't assume every Venezuelan or Spanish-speaking person next to you in a Maxi, in a mall, or wherever else it is you're shopping is there illegally. They're all allowed 90 days in Trinidad and Tobago. It is very possible for them to have come in just like you may go to Miami and shop and leave. So don't assume for a moment all that you're seeing there are here illegally or overstaying. The answer is yes. There is a policy. There are special units in immigration who work to try and ensure that persons who may overstay, etc., are picked up and dealt with, etc. Yesterday I was reading a number of reports. We have the detention center, etc. When police officers pick up anybody or have reason to suspect anybody, they will ask for their documentation if there's an issue to it. And as I say, it is not only Venezuela. We have a number of individuals from all other types of countries that are falling into that category, and it is something we're looking at.
The president of the Commission of International Affairs of Policy, which is a straight bloc in Latin America, he went on Twitter and he accused our Prime Minister of xenophobia, saying that it was a serious violation of human rights. I'm not sure if I forwarded this to you as well in the past, but he did so.
No, you didn't, but you had, I think, somebody at CNC3 ran it on news the other night, and I saw it. I am not on Twitter. I don't know who's on Twitter. I don't know if all that you see at Donald Trump Reel or whatever is really him. I'm not familiar with it. I saw your news report, and that if that is him saying that, that's his view and that's his opinion. The Prime Minister did what was responsible for Trinidad and Tobago. I was there with him when he picked up the phone and called the head of the UN, Secretary General of the UN, and they had a very good conversation, a long conversation. The Secretary General of the UN promised to send somebody to Trinidad to deal with it. You'd remember that was coming out of the return of about 80 plus, I think 82 if I remember correctly, Venezuelans via Venezuelan aircraft back to Venezuela. There's a lot of politics, geopolitics going on in the world right now, and Venezuela is a particularly hot spot in geopolitics. I'll leave it at that. I am supposed to be at a 2:30 meeting, so I have last question.
The issue where you talked about those who receive gate funding and so on, would that also apply to anyone else who received any other form of state scholarship in terms of medical studies?
Yes.
All right, thank you all very much.